Hey Dungeons & Dragons community, I love D&D, and 5th edition is my favorite edition, by far, but that doesn't mean it's perfect, and I think we all agree a couple adjustments could make things even better. I have done a series of those adjustments, and I'm providing them to anyone who wants them. There's no cost. Feel free to download them, share them, and please use them and let me know how it goes. In these videos, I'm explaining how those adjustments work and why I made any decisions for the changes I made. Now, a couple months ago, I did a video for revised feats. Specifically, I was looking at Players Handbook feats, and I presented a variant that had a very different system for feats. I'm still pretty happy with the feats I presented in that video, but we've had a couple months now, and there were a lot of changes. And so I had a chance to play with these feats myself. I've had a chance to talk with other people who've played these feats. I've had a chance to see them in action. I've had a chance to get some feedback. I had a lot of feedback from the video itself. And in that time, we have identified some issues with the feats that I presented in that video. So today what I want to do is I want to present the feats again. These are now the feats after they've been revised, and I think this is a better solution than what I presented a couple months ago. Now, if you haven't seen that video, don't worry about it. I'm going to be presenting the feats today as if presenting them for the first time. But if you did see that video and you're kind of wondering what kind of changes you can expect here, there were some minor mechanical things. Some of the features were too strong. I noticed there weren't enough features for some of the feats, so you would take something like Armor Specialist, you would be grabbing medium armor as a proficiency, maybe you don't use a shield, and there weren't enough features for you to select in order to use that feat. So I added some features, so there's more options on the feats. And one of the issues we had with feats was keeping track of which features you had. And the chief way that I've discovered that works for keeping track of which features you have is to give them each a unique name. But if you haven't seen those videos, so the feat variant is a bigger change than any of my other variants. So why is it that I'm making such a massive change to the feat system in the Player's Handbook? And what it really comes down to is I like the idea of feats. I think the idea of feats is that we can take a character and then we can choose feats as a way to specialize that character and make them unique. But I don't think the Player's Handbook accomplishes that. I think what feats do in the Player's Handbook instead is they tend to make characters look the same as other characters we've seen in other campaigns. For example, if I am playing a paladin and I want to specialize in melee combat, if I take feats, what I'm going to find is that I'm going to be pushed towards doing something like a paladin with a two-handed weapon, especially something like a polearm. Well, if I'm playing something like a ranged combat fighter, I will find that I'm often then pushed towards using a hand crossbow, just like the hand crossbow using fighter in the last campaign. Also, I find if you are a new player, feats are actually really hard to use because the names don't always clearly imply what they do, and it's not always clear which feats you want to take based on the kind of concept you have. So what you have is you have maybe a dwarven fighter, and you're thinking, I want this fighter to be really durable. And so when we look at the feats and we see 44 different feats listed, and we have to navigate them all, and the very first feat we find that seems to fit the concept we had in mind, durable, isn't the feat we wanted. The feat we probably wanted was tough, but that's much, much later in the Player's Handbook, pages away. So if you have to navigate all these feats and you're a new player, it's really not easy to know which feats to take. So I wanted a feat system that a new player could have a concept for a character, read the feat's name, and they know what it does. They know exactly the kind of character that should take that feat. And then they could take that feat for the concept that they had in mind, and the features underneath would fit with the concept they wanted to achieve. Finally, I thought there were certain kinds of iconic characters we see in fantasy all the time that don't work very well within the Player's Handbook feats. So if I want to play a character that uses a polearm, the Player's Handbook feats serve me well. If I want to play a character that uses a hand crossbow, the Player's Handbook feats serve me well. If I want to play a character that uses a longsword and no shield, maybe something like Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, then there's no real feat to help me. If I want to play a character that uses a sword and shield, like so many characters in iconic fantasy, I'm going to find Shield Specialist is there, doesn't work all that well, and there's nothing else to help me. And if I want to play a character like Drist, who uses 2-weapon fighting, this is an iconic Dungeons and Dragons character, then I would find that the rules within the Player's Handbook don't really serve that kind of character. And so with the feats, what you end up doing is if you allow them, you end up kind of pushing people in a certain direction, or you create an imbalance between characters that took that direction and those that didn't. And some of the feats are really unbalanced against each other. I mean, if you are playing a spellcaster, as an optimizer, I know that I probably want to look at feats like Warcaster. I probably am not interested in feats like Elemental Adept. But a new player doesn't know that. So what I wanted to do there is, again, kind of put these together so that a new player can just kind of go, okay, I'm playing a magical character. This is the feat, obviously, that I want for this character. And let's pick some features and have those features a little bit better balanced against each other so that they can take the features that kind of fit their concept and it's going to work out okay for them. I had a friend a few months ago who asked me about making a character that was a knife thrower. He had the idea that he would like to play a knife throwing character. And I had to tell him, well, I guess you could play a rogue. They could kind of do that. But there's no good way to make that within Dungeons & Dragons. There just isn't. And I thought, again, I want to open that up. I want it to be so that if you have a concept in mind, you can use the feats in order to make that concept work. So I wanted to make sure that the feats that I presented would allow you to do that. So it wasn't enough for me to just go into the feats and rebalance them. I needed to change the system itself to make it work better for newer players, to make it work better for new character concepts or iconic character concepts that didn't work within the system as it was presented. So those were my goals when I came to the feats, and I worked on it a long time, and then I've worked on it a long time since then. Countless hours have gone into this. And so the feats presented here are very different than the Player's Handbook. And I should say that if you're going to use these feats, I probably wouldn't use the Player's Handbook feats at all. This is a complete replacement for that system. And I do believe that these feats, number one, they're going to make it easier for new players to select feats. Number two, they're going to make it so that different styles of characters are better balanced against each other. And number three, it's going to make it really obvious, based on your character concept, which feats you should be selecting. So those were the targets when I went to feats, and that's why there are such drastic changes here. Let's get started. So here is the variant for feats. A feat represents an area of expertise that gives a character special capabilities. It embodies training, expertise, and abilities beyond what a class provides. At certain levels, your class gives you the ability score improvement feature. Using the optional feats rule, you can forego taking that feature to take a feat of your choice instead. In addition, the revised racial rules allow you to forego a +2 modifier on an ability score to begin with a feat at level 1. That is based on my racial variant. You can take each feat only once, unless the feat's description says otherwise. And as far as these feats go, all of them may be selected only once. You must meet any prerequisite specified in a feat in order to take the feat. If you ever lose a feat's prerequisite, you can't use that feat until you regain the prerequisite. For example, the Savage Combatant feat requires that you have a strength of 13 or higher. If your strength is reduced below 13 somehow, perhaps by a withering curse, you can't benefit from the Savage Combatant feat until your strength is restored. Whenever you choose a feat, you may pick any 3 of the features listed. A feature may be selected only once, unless the description says otherwise. Whenever you gain a level, you may change one of your selections. And the feats are listed below. Now, the first thing I want to mention is that none of these feats include a +1 modifier to an ability score. We often would refer to those as half feats in the Player's Handbook. So you would talk about a half feat is something like Heavy Armor Master would give you a +1 to Strength and Constitution, and then another small ability. Those kind of feats are gone, but I have included an additional optional rule for feats, and your DM can decide whether they want to include this or not. So at the bottom of the document, it says half feat variant. Your Dungeon Master may allow you to forgo 2 of your 3 feature selections from any given feat to instead receive a +1 to an ability score of your choice. So if your DM is fine with that optional rule, you may also do that. You can get a +1 to an ability score of your choice, and you may only select 1 feature from that feat. If you use that optional rule, then when you take a feat and you select a +1 to an ability score and you only select 1 feature, keep in mind that you can only select a feat once. So once you've made that selection, you're stuck with it. So we begin with our first feat called Armor Specialist. You've studied in the use of armor, and you've improved your ability to use armor effectively. So these are the features you can select. Again, you may select 3 of these features. Number 1, Light Armor Proficiency. You gain proficiency in light armor. Number 2, Light Armor Mastery. While wearing light armor, which you are proficient in, and you are damaged by a melee attack, you can use your reaction to move 5 feet in any direction without provoking an opportunity attack. Number 3, Light Armor Versatility. You may wear a chain shirt or hide armor as light armor for the sake of determining proficiency. When wearing a chain shirt or hide armor, you can add 3 rather than 2 to your armor class if you have a dexterity of 16 or higher. Number 4, Light Armor Mobility. While wearing light armor, opportunity attacks are made against you with disadvantage. Number 5, Light Armor Defense. While you are wearing light armor, you may add your armor's armor class bonus to your dexterity saving throws. Number 6, Medium Armor Proficiency. You gain proficiency in medium armor. You must be proficient in light armor through a source other than this feat to choose this feature. Number 7, Armored Stealth. Wearing medium or heavy armor, which you are proficient in, doesn't impose disadvantage on your dexterity stealth checks. Number 8, Armored Agility. When you wear medium armor you are proficient in, you can add 3 rather than 2 to your armor class if you have a dexterity of 16 or higher. Number 9, Heavy Armor Proficiency. You gain proficiency in heavy armor. You must be proficient in medium armor from a source other than this feat to choose this feature. Number 10, Armor Mastery. While you are wearing medium or heavy armor you are proficient in, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage that you take from non-magical weapons is reduced by your proficiency bonus. If you select this feature a second time, so this is one of those features that you may select more than once. If you select this feature a second time, the damage reduction applies to all bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing weapons. Number 11, Heavy Armor Mobility. You may ignore the minimum strength requirement of heavy armor you are proficient in. And number 12, Shield Proficiency. You gain proficiency in shields. So if you choose the Armor Specialist feat, and let's say you are a wizard, you may select Light Armor Proficiency, but because you've just selected Light Armor Proficiency, you can't select Medium Armor Proficiency or Heavy Armor Proficiency, and then you must select 2 other features that will work with your light armor, or maybe you'll take proficiency in shields. Well, if you're a rogue and you take this, then you could take Medium Armor Proficiency, and then you would choose 2 of the features that work with medium armor. Now remember, you can change your features as you go up in level. So let's say you are a wizard and you take this at first level, so you grab Light Armor Proficiency, Light Armor Mastery, and Light Armor Versatility. Then maybe at a higher level you multi-class, and maybe you multi-class into Fighter. So now you get Medium Armor Proficiency and Shield Proficiency through your Fighter level. So then you could make some changes to your Armor Specialist. Maybe you want to take Heavy Armor, or maybe you want some of the features that work with Medium Armor. But remember, you can only change 1 selection for each level, so you might have to gain a couple levels before you can have everything work with your new Armor Proficiency. The next feat is called Battle Magic. And the prerequisite here is you have to be able to cast at least 1 spell in order to select Battle Magic. Your magic has been honed to use in combat. Your quick thinking and specialized training provide certain advantages while fighting with spells. The first selection is Elemental Adept. You choose one of the following damage types: Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, Poison, or Thunder. Spells you cast ignore resistance to the damage of the chosen type. You may select this feature more than once with your 3 selections. If you do so, you choose a different damage type. Alternatively, if you select this feature a second time, creatures with immunity to the damage type selected with a previous selection of this feature may be damaged as if they had resistance instead. So if you had a character that was really relying on a single type of damage, maybe you're a draconic sorcerer and you specialize in lightning damage, then you could use Elemental Adept in order to bypass resistance to lightning damage with your spells. In addition, you could potentially even bypass lightning immunity if you take this feature more than once, but you would still be facing resistance. Number 2, reliable spells. When you roll damage for a spell you cast, you may treat any 1 on a damage die as a 2. Number 3 is Spell Sniper. When you cast a spell that requires you make an attack roll, the spell's range is doubled. Number 4, Spell Accuracy. Your ranged spell attacks ignore half cover and 3/4 cover. Number 5, Mystical Sharpshooter. Up to once on your turn, before you make a ranged spell attack, you can choose to forgo the proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, you add twice your proficiency modifier to the damage. Number 6, Hardy Concentration. You have advantage on Constitution saving throws that you make to maintain your concentration on a spell when you take damage. Number 7, you can perform the somatic components of spells even when you have weapons or shield in one or both hands. And number 8, Battlecaster. When a hostile creature's movement provokes an opportunity attack from you, you can use your reaction to cast a spell at the creature, rather than making an opportunity attack. The spell must have a casting time of 1 action and must target only that creature. So in some ways, this is better than the Players Handbook feats that help with spells, because we're getting some of Warcaster here, we're getting some of Elemental Adept here, we're also getting some unique features here, and we can pick and choose the ones we want, so in some ways that's better. But in some ways it's also worse, because we can only select battle magic once. So when we select it, we need to make a choice. Am I going to really focus on my certain kinds of damage spells? Or do I want to focus on being able to cast my spells while I'm using a weapon and a shield? Or do I want to focus on being able to do opportunity attacks? Or do I want to focus on increasing the range of my ranged spells? We have to make choices. And it's going to specialize your character in a certain way with battle magic. And although you can change that specialization with your level increases, you'll never be able to select more than 3 of these selections. The next feat is Combat Reflexes. Prerequisite here, you have to have a dexterity of 13 or higher in order to select this feat. You are especially quick and nimble, and this provides you with benefits in your movement and reactions. The first one of those is Nimble. When you're prone, standing up only uses 5 feet of your movement. Climbing doesn't cost you extra movement, and you can make a running, long, or high jump after moving only 5 feet on foot rather than 10 feet. The second one is Fast Reflexes. You gain a +5 bonus to initiative. The third one is Alert. You can't be surprised while you are conscious. The fourth one is Uncanny Senses. Other creatures don't get advantage on attack rolls against you as a result of being unseen by you. The fifth one is Fleet. Your speed increases by 10 feet. The sixth one is Light-Footed. Difficult terrain doesn't cost you extra movement. And number 7 is Combat Mobility. You may take the disengage action as a bonus action. If you select this feature a second time, your movement does not provoke attacks of opportunity from creatures you can see. The next feat is called Dual Weapon Specialist. This is my new 2-weapon fighting feat, because I've always felt that 2-weapon fighting didn't match up with 2-handed weapon fighting or with archery in the base rules. So that really pushed us towards 2-handed weapons and archery. And I figure that 2-weapon fighters are, at least within Dungeons & Dragons, iconic. And so I wanted to bring this up to the level where I felt it would compare with those other fighting styles. So the Dual Weapon Specialist, you are a master of fighting with 2 weapons at once. Your specialized training has provided you with certain advantages when employing 2-weapon fighting. The first one is Heavy Dual Wielder. You can use 2-weapon fighting even if the one-handed melee weapons you are holding aren't light. The second one is Defensive Dual Wielder. You get a +1 bonus to armor class while you're wielding a separate melee weapon in each hand. The third one is Quick Dual Wielding. Whenever you use or interact with an object to draw or stow a weapon, You may do so with two one-handed weapons at the same time. If you select this feature a second time, you may also stow an object you are holding as part of the same interaction. So if you were to select this twice and you wanted a character that maybe could switch from bow use to two-weapon fighting, something like a ranger might want to do, you could select this twice and you could actually stow your longbow and draw your two weapons with the same interact with an object. The fourth one is bonus attacks. You may use your bonus action to make an attack with a weapon you are holding on your turn, as long as you made a weapon attack with a different weapon you are holding, even if you didn't take the attack action. So sometimes there are features, sometimes there are spells that allow you to make a weapon attack, but not necessarily the attack action. This would punish two-weapon fighters because they couldn't use their bonus action because they didn't take the attack action. So this feature would allow them to combine those two things. As long as you're making one attack with a melee weapon, you can use your two-weapon fighting. The fifth one is multi-attacker. When you use a bonus action to attack using two-weapon fighting, you may make an additional attack with that weapon if you made more than one attack with another weapon you were holding that turn. So the way this would work is two-weapon fighting tended to be actually not bad at low levels. So if you were playing a low-level fighter, for example, and you were employing two-weapon fighting, you're probably doing just fine. But once you get to 5th level, you would start to fall behind. And once you got to 11th level, you really started to fall behind. Just because two-weapon fighting didn't scale. But if we were using something like Great Weapon Master, for example, it did scale because we're getting that bonus on every additional attack. So with multi-attacker, what we're doing is we're helping two-weapon fighting keep up. And then finally, weapon versatility. You gain proficiency in 3 one-handed weapons of your choice. So if you are not proficient in the weapons you want to use with two-weapon fighting, you can use that selection in order to make sure you are. The next feat is educated. You have studied with a capable teacher, or at a college, perhaps learning lore, languages, or perhaps learning other skills through a mentor. And the first choice there is linguist. You learn 3 languages of your choice. Your understanding of communication allows you to communicate with a creature who speaks a language you don't know on a rudimentary level after 10 minutes of interaction. In addition, you may decipher a written language you don't know on a rudimentary level after 10 minutes of study. The second choice is coder. You can ably create written ciphers. Others can't decipher code you create unless you teach them. They succeed on an intelligence check with a DC equal to your intelligence score plus your proficiency bonus, or they use magic to decipher it. Your spellbook, if you have one, may be written in such ciphers, preventing it from being copied by anyone you have not taught the cipher to. The third one is skill training. Gain proficiency in a skill for which you are not proficient. This feature may be selected more than once, so you can gain multiple skills through this feat. The next one is tool training. Gain proficiency in 3 sets of tools for which you are not proficient. You may add half your proficiency modifier on any ability check to use a set of tools for which you are not proficient. The fifth one is expert education. Gain expertise in a skill or tools for which you are proficient. Note this feature may only be selected once. And then the sixth one is studied. You gain advantage on any intelligence ability check to recall information about any type of creature. So if your concept is a character that is really well studied and well learned, then obviously educated is the right feat for you, and you will find the features here that support that kind of character. The next feat is magical training. You have learned the basics of magic, either through a teacher or through your own initiative. This has given you rudimentary magic skills and or the training to deal with spellcasters. So there's kind of 2 themes put together here. The first is the ability to learn some basic magic, and the second is the ability to deal with those who use magic. So you select 3 of these features. The first one is Magical Adept. You choose 1 first-level spell from any spell list. You learn that spell, you can cast it at its lowest level. Once you cast it, you must finish a long rest before you can cast it again using this feat. You use the same ability score as the class from which you chose the spell. You may select this feature more than once. The second one is Hedge Magic. Choose 2 cantrips from any one spell list. You can cast those cantrips using the same ability score as the class from which you chose those cantrips. You may select this feature more than once. The next one is Ritual Caster. You gain the ability to cast 2 first-level spells of your choice as a ritual. Choose one of the following classes: Bard, Cleric, Druid, Sorcerer, Warlock, or Wizard. You must choose your spells from the class's spell list, and the spells you choose must have the ritual tag. The class you chose also determines your spellcasting ability for those spells: Charisma for Bard, Sorcerer, or Warlock, Wisdom for Cleric or Druid, Intelligence for Wizard. If you select this feature a second time, you may also select a second level ritual spell from the same class that you may cast as a ritual. The fifth selection is the ritual book. You've learned to cast wizard rituals from a ritual book you possess. If you come across a wizard spell in written form, such as a magical spell scroll or spellbook, you might be able to add it to your ritual book. The spell must be no higher than half your level rounded up, and it must have the ritual tag. The process of copying the spell into your ritual book takes 2 hours per level of the spell, and it costs 50 gold pieces per level. The cost represents material components you expand as you experiment with the spell to master it, as well as the fine inks you need to record it. Intelligence is your spellcasting ability for these spells. If you select this feature a second time, you may select another ritual casting class, and you may add their ritual spells to your ritual book. The spellcasting ability used for these rituals matches the class for which the rituals belong. The fifth feature is Mage Slayer. When a creature within 5 feet of you casts a spell, you can use your reaction to make a melee weapon attack against that creature. If you select this feature a second time and the attack hits, the spell is lost. So one selection of this feature allows you to make the reaction attack. The second selection of this feature would allow you to make them lose that spell if you hit. The next selection is Spell Interruption. When you damage a creature that is concentrating on a spell, that creature has disadvantage on the saving throw it makes to maintain concentration. And then the final selection is Universal Spell Focus. If you have the spellcasting focus feature from a class that you have levels in, that spellcasting focus becomes an applicable focus for all spells from any class. So if you are a multi-class spellcaster, maybe you are a cleric and a wizard, you could use that emblem on your shield as a spellcasting focus for any spell, even your wizard spells. The next feat is Mounted Combat Specialist. Now, I'm not a fan of the mounted combat feat within the Player's Handbook. I don't think it offers you enough. It tends to not work at all if you're playing a small size character on a medium sized mount. It doesn't really do that much for you. And regardless of the kind of character you're playing, I don't think it is going to be worth a feat selection for you. So I wanted to make mounted combat viable because, again, with fantasy, some characters are a mounted kind of character. You're playing like a Rohan Rider inspired character. You want a feat that's going to help you. Mounted Combat Specialist is going to do that. You are a master of fighting well mounted. Your specialized training has provided you with certain advantages when fighting on horseback or another applicable mount. The first selection is Cavalry Attack. You have advantage on melee attack rolls against any unmounted creature that is smaller than your mount. If you select this feature a second time, you also have advantage against unmounted creatures of equal size to your mount. Now note that since we've made this a feature, rather than being automatic with the feat, as a small size character, we can just choose not to take this feature. The second feature is Mount Defender. You can force an attack targeted at your mount to target you instead. If you select this feature a second time, that attack is made with disadvantage. The third feature is Durable Mount. If your mount is subjected to an effect that allows it to make a dexterity saving throw to take only half damage, it instead takes no damage if it succeeds on the saving throw and only half damage if it fails. It may use your saving throw modifier if it is higher. If you select this feature a second time, your mount gains the same benefit against effects that allow it to make Constitution saving throw. The fourth feature is Lance Charge. If your mount moves at least 10 feet towards an enemy on your turn and you use the attack action to attack that enemy with the lance, you can choose to forgo your proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, you add twice your proficiency modifier to the damage. If you hit with your initial attack and have the extra attack feature, you may forgo your second attack and the hit is considered a critical hit and the enemy is knocked prone if they're no larger than your mount. Now, I need to make a quick note here because I have made an adjustment to one of my previous variants that is going to close a potential loophole. And that is, under the Rogue variant, I have specified under sneak attack, the document has been updated, I have specified under sneak attack that you can't use a lance for sneak attack, because before a lance could qualify you for sneak attack, and therefore what you could do is you could potentially double your sneak attack damage dice with a lance charge. Now you would have needed to get the extra attack feature by some other method, so through multiclassing, but if we got to a high level, being able to double your sneak attack dice every round would be a problem. So I've made a specific annotation with sneak attack that it doesn't work with lances. But what about a paladin? Can a paladin double their smite with lance charge? Yes, that is as intended. A paladin can give up their extra attack and therefore get a critical, and if they added a smite, they could double those dice. The fifth feature is mounted combat mastery. If your mount is controlled, and if you don't know the rules, there are specific rules in the Player's Handbook on controlled mounts versus uncontrolled mounts. So if you don't know those rules, just very quickly, if you choose to control a mount, there's certain things that a mount can't do, but you get the advantage that it is going to move on the same turn that you do. So if you want your mount to, say, attack with its hooves, there's no way to do that with a controlled mount under the base rules. But with mounted combat mastery, if your mount is controlled, it is not restricted in the actions you can have it make. Normally, a control mount is restricted to the dodge, dash, or disengage actions. If you select this feature a second time, you may control a mount even if it's not trained for combat. And finally, weapon versatility. You gain proficiency in the lance and 2 other martial weapons of your choice. The next feat is Ranged Combat Specialist. Again, it should be pretty clear as you see these feats what kind of character should be taking these feats. And once that kind of character takes these feats, every feature they could want to fulfill the concept they're looking for should be within that feat. With Ranged Combat Specialist, you are a master of ranged attacks in combat. Your specialized training has provided you with certain advantages when using weapons that attack at range. The first selection is Fast Loader. You ignore the loading property of ranged weapons for which you are proficient. The second is Point Blank Shot. Being within 5 feet of a hostile creature doesn't impose disadvantage on your ranged attack rolls. Third one is Fast Firing. When you use the attack action and attack with a one-handed weapon, you can use a bonus action to attack with a one-handed ranged weapon or thrown weapon you are holding, or may draw as part of the bonus action. Number 4, Long Range Sniper. Attacking at long range doesn't impose disadvantage on your ranged weapon attack rolls, and your ranged weapon attacks ignore half and 3/4 cover. If you select this feature a second time, you may attack with your weapon up to twice the weapon's maximum range. Attacks over the maximum range of the weapon impose disadvantage on the attack roll. Number 5, Deadly Aim. Before you make a ranged attack with a weapon that you are proficient in and holding with 2 hands, you can choose to forgo your proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, you add twice your proficiency modifier to the damage. If you select this feature a second time, you can choose to forgo any amount up to your proficiency modifier to the attack roll, adding twice the amount of the penalty to the damage. And number 6, Fast Thrower. You may draw weapons with the thrown property as part of the attack with that weapon. And number 7, Weapon Versatility. You gain proficiency in 3 ranged weapons or weapons with the thrown property. So there's a few things to unpack here. The first thing is, you might notice that you can no longer combine the extra attack you could get with Crossbow Expert with the damage bonus you would get through Sharpshooter. Instead, what's happening is, if you want to get the damage bonus, you have to be using a 2-handed ranged weapon. If you want the fast firing bonus or the bonus action attack, then you need to be using a one-handed ranged weapon or a thrown weapon. What this is going to do is it's going to make hand crossbows a reasonably good weapon, but it's also going to make longbow a reasonably good weapon. And it just matters which way you want to specialize. Also, for the first time, we're going to have thrown weapons be viable. Because with this feat, what we can do is we can not only draw thrown weapons and throw them with extra attacks, we can also do so with a bonus action attack if we select the right feature. So that is a way that we could actually make that knife thrower that you've been considering something that might be viable. I'm still not sure it's your best optimal bet, but for people who want to play that kind of character, who want that kind of concept, with ranged combat specialist, we can at least make it viable for them. The next feat is Savage Combatant. This one has a prerequisite. You need a strength of 13 or higher. You are a crazed attacker on the battlefield. Your bloodlust has granted you certain advantages while fighting with unmatched zeal. The first selection is Brutal Charge. When you take the dash action and end your movement within range of a target with a melee weapon you are holding, you may make the attack as part of the same action. If you choose to shove a creature with the attack action gained as part of a dash, you may choose to shove the creature up to 10 feet and knock them prone with the same shove attack. Second one is Street Fighter. You are proficient with improvised weapons, and your unarmed strike uses a d4 for damage. When you hit a creature with an unarmed strike or an improvised weapon on your turn, you can use a bonus action to attempt to grapple or shove the target. Number 3, Grappler. You may use a bonus action to grapple an opponent that is prone. Note that this one feature is probably better than the whole Grappler feat in the Player's Handbook. Number 4, Athlete. You gain proficiency in athletics, and if you're already proficient, you gain expertise. Number 5, Savage Attack. This one's been scaled back a little bit. Once per turn, when you roll damage for a melee attack, you may roll the weapon's damage dice twice and select the better result. If you are adding additional dice to the damage roll, such as after scoring a critical hit or a sneak attack, those dice are rolled normally. If you select this feature a second time, you may inflict the maximum possible result of the weapon's damage dice rather than rolling. So, what kind of character is going to take Savage Combatant? Well, that crazed attacker on the battlefield. If we take that, we're going to have some options here. They're going to be grabbing people, they're going to be shoving people, and they're going to be hitting especially hard with their weapons. The next feat is Sharp Intellect. Your mind is always working, allowing you to notice the finer details, remember the relevant facts, the speech and mannerisms of others, and process your thoughts quickly. The first feature here is Perfect Memory. You always know the number of hours before the next sunrise or sunset. You always know which way is north. You have advantage on ability checks to avoid getting lost. In addition, you can accurately recall anything you have seen or heard within the past month. If you select this feature a second time, your memory becomes so acute you can accurately recall even the most finite details of anything you've seen or heard within the last month, to the point that you could duplicate a key or a spell book that you have observed. So absolutely perfect memory. The second feature is Lip Reader. If you can see a creature's mouth while it is speaking a language you understand, you can interpret what it's saying by reading its lips. In addition, you can mimic the speech of another person or the sounds made by other creatures. You must have heard the person speaking or heard the creature make the sound for at least 1 minute. A successful wisdom insight check, contested by your charisma deception check, allows the listener to determine the effect is faked. Third feature is Intuitive Assessment. If you spend at least 1 minute observing or interacting with another creature outside of combat, you can learn certain information about its capabilities compared to your own. The DM tells you if the creature is your equal, superior, or inferior in regards to its intelligence and wisdom scores. If you select this feature a second time, you may know precisely the intelligence and wisdom scores of an observed creature. The fourth feature is Versatile Intellect. Whenever you make a wisdom ability check, you may substitute your intelligence score if it is higher. The fifth selection is Versatile Intuition. Anytime you make an intelligence ability check, you may substitute your wisdom score if it is higher. And finally, the sixth selection, Arcane Intellect. You understand the nature of magic, allowing you to identify spells when cast by a spellcaster. If you perceive a spell being cast, the spell's effect, or both, you can make an Intelligence Arcana check to identify the spell being cast. The DC equals 15 plus the spell's level. If you select this feature a second time, you make the roll with advantage. Now I should note that in the Player's Handbook there are no rules for identifying a spell if it's cast. But in Xanathar's there was rules made, and the way it would work is you would use your reaction and you would get a roll. If you select Arcane Intellect, you may do so without using a reaction. If you are playing something like a caster who wants to use Counterspell, Arcane Intellect might be a very good investment for you. The next feat is Single-Handed Weapons Specialist. You are a master fighting with one-handed melee weapons and versatile weapons. Your specialized training has provided you with certain advantage when employing these weapons. So we're not talking about two-weapon fighting here. We're not talking about sword and shield fighting here. We're talking about the character like Aragorn, who has a longsword, and He might use it two-handed, he might use it one-handed, but one way or the other, he's probably not employing a shield. That kind of character exists in modern fantasy quite a bit. Aragorn is one of many examples we could select. There needed to be a way within Dungeons & Dragons for us to make that kind of character viable in order for us to have our full selection of possible concepts within Dungeons & Dragons. So it was important to me to have a feat to make that style of character viable. Single-handed weapon specialist is the way I've done that. The first feature is Nimble Warrior. When you use a melee weapon one-handed and nothing in the other, it is treated as if it has the finesse property. So that's going to open up the possibility that if you are playing a dex-based character and you want to use a longsword, you can do so. The second feature is Disable. Before you make a melee attack with a weapon for which you're proficient with, and you are holding nothing in your other hand, you can choose to forgo your proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, the target of the attack suffers disadvantage on the next weapon attack roll it makes before the end of its next turn. If you select this feature a second time, the target of the attack suffers disadvantage on its next 2 weapon attack rolls it makes before the end of its next turn. The third feature is Parry. When you are wielding a weapon with which you are proficient and nothing in your other hand, and another creature hits you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your armor class for that attack, potentially causing the attack to miss you. If you select this feature a second time, after you use this feature, you retain a +2 bonus to your armor class against melee attacks until the beginning of your next turn. The fourth feature is Deadly Swing. Before you make an attack roll with a melee weapon with the versatile property you are wielding in 2 hands, you can choose to forgo your proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, you add twice your proficiency modifier to the damage. If you select this feature a second time, you may choose to forgo any amount up to your proficiency modifier to the attack roll, adding twice the amount of the penalty to the damage. I should have mentioned this under the ranged weapon specialist, but this is a feature I've added as well because with the Player's Handbook, these kinds of abilities, you take a -5 to hit and you get a +10 to damage. At first level, that's overwhelming. And at high levels, then it kind of comes into the point where it fits. Just because hits are more reliable as we go up in levels in Dungeons & Dragons. That's just kind of the way the challenge ratings and the armor class system work. So, number one, I figured it should scale. So, by having it scale with your proficiency modifier, it's going to be a more consistent process. But I also wanted to give you the option to make it a little more customizable. So, if you select the feature a second time, particularly at high levels, you might choose to take a penalty of -1 and get a +2 to damage. You might choose to take a penalty of -3 and get +6 to damage based on how difficult the creature is to hit. The fifth feature is Extended Reach. When you make an attack roll with a melee weapon with a versatile property and holding nothing in your other hand, you may make a one-handed attack as if the weapon had the reach property. This is actually based, I've seen this in some YouTube videos of weapon specialists or HEMA specialists who talking about the longsword and how you can use a one-handed strike with it to attack with a much greater range. And so that is what that feature is based on. The sixth feature is Parry Missile. When wielding a melee weapon that lacks the heavy or two-handed property, you may use the weapon to attempt to deflect a missile attack. After the attack roll is made, you may use your reaction to add your proficiency modifier to your armor class against that attack, potentially causing the attack to miss you. If you select this feature a second time, after you use this feature, you retain a +2 bonus to your armor class against ranged attacks until the beginning of your next turn. The seventh feature is Close Quarters Fighting. After you make an attack with the benefit of your proficiency modifier against a creature within 5 feet with a melee weapon you are holding in one hand, you may use your bonus action to make a shove or grapple attack with your free hand. And then the final selection, Weapon Versatility, you gain proficiency in 3 one-handed weapons of your choice. There are a bunch of concepts that are iconic to fantasy that all of a sudden, with single-handed weapon specialist, are going to be viable. Not necessarily better than using two-handed weapons, not necessarily better than using ranged weapons, but viable, comparable. That was the goal here, and I think this does that. The next feat is Skulker. You are an expert in skulking and scouting in dangerous locations, like dungeons, dark hallways in an enemy lair, or caverns. The The first feature is Stealthy. You gain proficiency in the stealth skill. If you already have proficiency, you gain expertise. If you select this feature a second time, moving stealthily does not hamper your movement. Second feature, Inventive Sneaking. You can try to hide when you are lightly obscured from the creature from which you are hiding. The third is Hidden Sniper. When you are hidden from a creature and miss it with a ranged weapon attack, making the attack doesn't reveal your position. If you select this feature a second time, you may use your reaction to make another hide check if your position is revealed after hitting with a ranged weapon attack. Fourth feature, See in Shadows. Dim light doesn't impose disadvantage on your wisdom perception checks, relying on sight. If you select this feature a second time, you may see in darkness as if you had dark vision, 60 feet, or if you already have dark vision, the range is increased by 30 feet. Fifth feature is Sharp Hearing. You have advantage on wisdom perception checks relying on sound. Sixth feature, Trap Avoidance. You have advantage on saving throws made to avoid or resist traps. Seventh feature is Trap Resistance. You have resistance to the damage dealt by traps. And number 8, Alert Traveler. Traveling at a fast pace doesn't impose the normal -5 penalty on your passive wisdom perception score. The next feat is Survivor. You have a knack for surviving the most harrowing of situations, and you have a talent for keeping those in your care alive. So the first feature is Combat Medic. When you use a healer's kit to stabilize a dying creature, that creature also regains 1 hit point. The second feature is Doctor. As an action, you can spend 1 use of a healer's kit to tend to a creature and restore 1d6 plus 4 hit points to it, plus additional hit points equal to the creature's maximum number of hit dice. The creature can't regain hit points from this feat again until it finishes a short or long rest. The third feature is Inspiring Leader. You can spend 10 minutes inspiring your companions, shoring up their resolve to fight. When you do so, choose up to 6 friendly creatures, which can include yourself, within 30 feet of you, who can see or hear you, and who can understand you. Each creature can gain temporary hit points equal to 1/2 your level, rounded up. A creature can't gain temporary hit points from this feat again until it's finished a short or long rest. If you select this feature twice, the temporary hit points are equal to your level. If you select this feature 3 times, the temporary hit points are equal to your level plus your charisma modifier. And the final feature is Fortunate. You have a luck point. Whenever you make an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw, you can spend the luck point to roll an additional d20. You can choose to spend your luck point after you roll the die, but before the outcome is determined. You can choose whether to use your roll or the initial result. You can also spend your luck point when an attack roll is made against you. Roll a d20, then choose whether the attack uses the attacker's roll or yours. If more than one creature spends a luck point to influence the outcome of the roll, the points cancel each other out, so no additional dice are rolled. You regain your expended luck point when you finish a long rest. You may select this feature more than once. This is very similar, of course, to the luck feat, but I should mention that the wording has changed a little bit so that when you can change your disadvantage into super advantage, kind of loophole that existed within the Players Handbook version, the wording here doesn't allow that anymore. The next feat is Tactician. In combat, you are careful and employ enhanced tactics that make you especially deadly. The first feature here is Combat Tactician. You learn a maneuver of your choice from those available to the Battlemaster archetype in the fighter class. If a maneuver you use requires your target to make a saving throw to resist the maneuver's effects, the saving throw DC equals 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your strength or dexterity modifier, your choice. You gain 1 superiority die, which is a d6. This die is added to any superiority dice you have from another source. This die is used to fuel your maneuver. A superiority die is expended when you use it. You regain your expended superiority dice when you finish a short or long rest. You may select this feature more than once. Each additional selection provides an additional maneuver known and an additional d6 superiority die. The second feature here is Disabling Strike. When you hit a creature with an opportunity attack, the creature's speed becomes 0 for the rest of the turn. The third feature here is Sentinel. Creatures provoke opportunity attacks from you even if they take the disengage action before leaving your reach. And then the final is Opportunist. When a creature within range of a melee weapon you are holding makes an attack against a target other than you, and that target doesn't have this feat, you can use your reaction to make a melee weapon attack against that attacking creature. The next feat is Tough as Nails. Again, it should be clear when you read Tough as Nails the kind of character that wants to take this feat. the character who wants to be durable, the character who wants to be tough. Regardless, tough as nails is the feat for you. The prerequisite here, you're going to need a constitution score of 13 or higher. You are especially hardy. You are wounded less and irrepressible even when wounded, recovering with surprising speed. The first feature is tough. Your hit point maximum increases by an amount equal to your level when you select this feature. Whenever you gain a level thereafter, your hit point maximum increases by an additional 1 hit point. You may select this feature twice. If you do so, you gain twice the benefit. The second feature is durable. When you spend hit dice to recover hit points, instead of rolling, you heal the maximum possible result. For example, if a cleric, who has a d8 hit dice, spends 2 hit dice on healing, they automatically regain 16 hit points plus their modifier for con on both dice. The third feature is tenacious. Your hit point maximum cannot be lowered. The fourth feature is hardy. You do not suffer exhaustion when you fall to 0 hit points. If you select this feature a second time, you may recover up to 2 levels of exhaustion on a long rest. And I should note that if this is the only variant you're using, that's not going to make any sense and you probably don't want to use it. But if you are using my Players Handbook variant or Rules variant, you're going to know that when you fall to 0 hit points, you're going to gain a level of exhaustion. So this feature is your way around that. And then the final feature is resilient. You gain proficiency in saving throws in the ability score of your choice. The next feat is Two-Handed Weapon Specialist. So just because we're including some new fighting styles, we're going to have our old standbys as well. The prerequisite here, you need to have a strength of 13 or higher. You are a master of fighting with a weapon held in 2 hands. Your specialized training has provided you with certain advantages when employing a weapon this way. The first feature here is Ferocious Strike. Before you make an attack roll with a melee weapon you are holding in 2 hands, you can choose to forgo your proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, you add twice your proficiency modifier to the damage. If you select this feature a second time, you may choose to forgo any amount up to your proficiency modifier to the attack roll, adding twice the amount of the penalty to the damage. Second choice here is Merciless. On your turn, when you score a critical hit with a weapon held in 2 hands, or reduce a creature to 0 hit points with 1, you can immediately make 1 more melee weapon attack using your bonus action. If you select this option a second time, you may make 1 additional attack without using your bonus action. You may only benefit from Merciless once on your turn. The third selection is Pommel Strike. When you take the attack action and make all attacks with a melee weapon you are holding in 2 hands with the benefit of your proficiency modifier. So if you forgo your proficiency modifier, it does not qualify. You can use a bonus action to make a melee attack with another part of the weapon. This attack uses the same ability modifier as the primary attack. The weapon's damage die for this attack is d4 and it deals bludgeoning damage. So just like with ranged weapons, the ability to combine the bonus action attack with the bonus to damage gained by minus to hit, we can't combine those anymore, both with ranged weapons and with two-handed weapons. The fourth feature here is Readied Weapon. While you're wielding a reach weapon you are holding in 2 hands, other creatures provoke an opportunity attack from you when they enter your reach. The weapon that provoked the attack must be used to make the attack in order to use this feature. And then the final feature is Weapon Versatility. You gain proficiency in 3 weapons with the two-handed or versatile property. And then our final feat is the Weapon and Shield Specialist. This is, again, really iconic in fantasy. Now, we had Shield Master in Players Handbook, but it wasn't that great. Shield and Weapon Specialist is better. It's more in line with what we see with range combat. It's more in line with what we see with two-handed combat. So with the Weapon and Shield Specialist, first, you have to have a proficiency in shields. That's the prerequisite. You are a master of fighting with weapon and shield. Your specialized training has provided you with certain advantages when employing weapon combat while you have a shield equipped. The first feature is Shield Shove. You can use a bonus action to try to shove a creature within 5 feet of you with your shield. If you select this option a second time, you may, with a successful shove, both push the creature 5 feet and knock them prone. The second feature is Shielded Position. If you aren't incapacitated, you can add your shield's armor class bonus to any dexterity saving throw you make against a spell or other harmful effect that targets you, and if that effect would inflict half damage on a successful saving throw, you can use your reaction to take no damage instead if you succeed on the saving throw. If you select this option a second time, You only take half damage if you fail the saving throw. The third option, Shield Bash. You are proficient in the use of a shield as an improvised weapon. The shield has the light property and inflicts 1d4 bludgeoning damage on a successful hit. If you select this option a second time, a magical shield is considered a magical weapon for the purposes of overcoming resistance and bludgeoning damage. The fourth feature, Rapid Ready. You may equip or stow a shield with the same interact with an object you use to equip or stow a weapon. If you select this option a second time, you may stow a previously held weapon with the same interact with an object. So again, you could switch from using your longbow to using your sword and shield with an interact with an object. The fifth feature is Defensive Fighting. Before you make a melee attack with a weapon that you are holding, while wielding a shield in your other hand, you can choose to forgo your proficiency modifier to the attack roll. If the attack hits, the target of the attack has disadvantage on any attack rolls against you into the beginning of your next turn. And the final feature is Weapon Versatility. You gain proficiency in 3 one-handed weapons of your choice. So that's the Feat variant, now revised. As you can see, there are more features than there were before. Some of them have been scaled back. There are way more options to upgrade features that you select by selecting them a second time. And all the features now have a name. This is going to make it easier for you to keep track of which features you selected for any feat, and in addition, I think the feats are a little bit better balanced than they were before. Next week, we're going to be talking about 7th level spells, then 8th level spells, then 9th level spells, then the Players Handbook variant will be done. But until next week, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun, because D&D is for everyone. Thanks everyone, and I will talk to you next week.